WNST stations of baseball at pennant races and Labor Day. That's so 3-4 years ago around here. Another place that is so 3-4 years ago is Kansas City, where the Orioles will be this weekend for what I'm sure the schedule makers thought might be an interesting game, given the history and given the American League Championship Series. I remember we were all angry at the Royals. Now it's just about who wins the Bobby Witt Jr. sweepstakes. Steve Stewart is the longtime broadcaster of the Kansas City Royals. He has the interesting background of also being a broadcaster with the Orioles at WBAL. When they stunk, went off to Kansas City, they stunk. Then he won a championship and got a ring, and now, well, we're familiar with this, Steve, even though it's not any fun, right?
Well, no, losing's no fun, that's for sure, Nestor. But at this point, we've seen, the last three world champions were all teams that were awful and kind of used being awful to draft high and build, and then that launched them eventually to a championship. The Royals did it. It took the Royals a longer time, but they did it. Houston definitely did it. I mean, they had 3 or 4 awful years of well over 100 losses. And the Cubs did it too. I mean, 5-6 years ago, the Cubs were off the radar and were nothing. So look at them now, and, that's the hope that you have in Baltimore and in Kansas City. And you think, okay, let's hope that we're going to draft as well as possible with these opportunities and build it back up. And I will say this, I think, and I'm sure it's true in Baltimore too, and I know there's a little palace intrigue about what's going on in the future there with the front office and everything, and with the manager. But in our case, I know Ned Yost doesn't like losing, and Dayton Moore, general manager, doesn't like losing. But you look where Ned was. Ned was in Atlanta. He was a minor league manager there before he was on the major league coaching staff. We remember how horrible the Braves were in the 80s, right? I mean, they were on TBS, and there'd be 1,500 people in the stands, and eventually
Chief Nakahoma was out there. He was alone on the reservation many nights.
Exactly, exactly. He didn't need a reservation at that point. But anyway, so they come along. Look what they built for the '90s. Then he goes to Milwaukee. They had been losing for 22 years, and then look what they built, where they have won a championship, but they've certainly had some good runs and got them going again. And the same thing here. And the administration of Baltimore did that, where they've been down for a long time. They've had a nice run the last few years. And the thing about baseball people that I find, and this is probably somewhat universal, everybody wants to win, but people who love what they do in a front office or managing or coaching, they love winning, but they also love building. And when you're building, at least the early stages of it, usually you're not winning very much, and sometimes they're not winning very much. Like you talked about Bobby Witt Jr. or whoever the first pick in the draft is next year. You hope you're going to get a Hall of Famer. You hope it's going to be a Chipper Jones or a King Griffey Jr. or somebody that's
or Manny Machado.
Manny Machado, exactly. Somebody can be a game-changing type of player for you. So it's unfortunately it's kind of the cycle of baseball life.
He is Steve Stewart. He is out in Kansas City, Missouri, where the Orioles will be this weekend. The difference there and here also, not just a confidence level that you have a general manager who knows what he's doing, ownership with a strategy that is communicated clearly to the fans, a result that they can see and feel and be a part of. The aftermath of whenever winning is. Now, you guys had a hell of a parade out there. I remember talking to you about it. I saw you in that sea of a million people in blue out there, Steve. But we didn't have that here. And the aftermath of that is we look like the Montreal Expos when the Yankees are in town over the weekend. No one's going to the games. There's no conversation around the team. I have a feeling in Kansas City they're still going to draw 32,000 on Mother's Day next year, even if the team's only going to struggle to win 73 games or whatever, because they built something there when they won that sort of spills over to, well, if the Royals stink, I'll just go to the ballpark 3 times this year instead of 6 or whatever. We're not at that point in Baltimore, and I know you know what I'm talking about here. I know that you witnessed it the first time the atrophy happened around here. Steve, the real sad part here is that they never grew any legs with what they built. They never really built back on top of the mess that was left behind from your generation back at the turn of the century. And I don't know where that's going to take them, because I think Kansas City can be fortified to some degree. I'll be honest with you. I was in Pittsburgh this summer. I was kind of shocked that they built no legs off of McCutchen and their success there, that nobody's going to the games there either, that I thought there was some goodwill built up, or at least there was supposed to be in the old days after you won a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, we do live in somewhat of a "what have you done for me lately" world. I mean, when Houston was so bad 5 years ago, I remember going to their, I'd gone there when I was with the Reds and I was in the National League and they were in our division. We used to go to Houston a lot. And I remember when Clemens and Pettit and Roy Oswalt were in their rotation, they were drawing $3 million. It was a big deal every night. And we showed up as they were finishing their NL run and joining the AL 12, 13, 14 in there before they got hot again and got good again. And it was almost like you were moving into this beautiful mansion that used to be beautifully appointed and everything was well taken care of. And you walked in and it was empty and it felt kind of hollow inside. And that's the tough thing is when you're rebuilding, depending on how long it takes, but when you're rebuilding, the show is really in the minor leagues. Like the worker bees, the duck's feet under the water is what's going on. But you still got to field a major league team. That's what makes it tough. Now, Houston had the advantage where they were basically off TV for 3 years. The fan base was mad because they had moved to a new league, so nobody gave a crap about anything for 2 or 3 years there while they were building. And said, boom, once they were back on TV, they were a good team. And that's if you're going to be down for a while, that's about as advantageous a top proposition as you can have for being down. I mean, the one thing the Orioles did have is, even though they didn't win a championship, they probably had a longer window. Our window was 13 through last year. I can't remember exactly the years the Orioles, first got back to got a winning record.
Well, the window was a little longer in Kansas City because you had so many projects in the big leagues who hadn't bloomed. I remember Moustakas coming in here batting like Chris Davis, like worse than Chris Davis at one point, and it was like late May, and I'm like, how long did they let this kid bat 130 in the big leagues before they send him down, right?
And Dave Moore has always said, you got, and this is the tough thing, is you got to give a guy 1,500 at bats to really know what he is. That's a long time. That's 3 years of playing every day. So. And then you only have control for 6 or 7 years, unless you hope it's not a Boris client. You can extend it beyond that. Otherwise, you're going to lose them, and that's just kind of the nature of the beast. And so, we had Hosmer for 7 years because we didn't bring him up till May 6th of 11. So that wound up being in effect 7 years of him, 7 years of a little more than 7 years of Moose because we had him earlier this year. But it's tough to get it all lined up where you get your pitching and your hitting lined up where they can kind of blossom at relatively the same time and come up and all perform well together. It's not an easy bridge to cross. But, I mean, Pittsburgh's had a really good run. Now, Pittsburgh never quite, quote unquote, went for it. They didn't make any moves like the Royals, traded for Cueto and Ben Zobrist, and they probably don't win the World Series without both of those guys in 15.
Well, I just think when you've had a lot of crowded nights, though, at a ballpark, when you've gone from empty to full every night for a summer or 2 or 3, you'd like to think that it wouldn't fall off a cliff. You know what I mean?
No, not fall off a cliff, but it can gradually fall back. I mean, the Cardinals are the model for like a middle market team that never has really had to go through a rebuild. And even this year, it looked like they were going to be sellers. They made a managerial change, and boom, boom, boom. Look at what they're. They may well be a wild card this year in a year where everybody thought they were in a rebuild mode. So and a lot of it goes back to drafting. Obviously, their player development's been remarkable over the years. I mean, they lose Pujols, the compensation draft. They wind up taking Michael Wacha in the draft, and he becomes that's just one of 100 examples of how they've kept it going. And that's the model that the Orioles and the Royals and a lot of teams that are, looking to get back up there need to, try to keep in their sights. I mean, there's certainly some luck involved in the draft too, because it's this is the hardest sport to draft and project talent. There's no question about that. And, so it's not easy, but again, building is fun. And you just hope that, that you can, you get the minor leagues going and fans, one thing Baltimore has is the affiliates are all really close to Baltimore. I mean, not that everybody's going to be at, in Norfolk and in Frederick every night, but they are close by, so you can, it's a little, they're kind of in the neighborhood, so to speak. Most teams have them a little further away, not as easy to go check them out. But, with the way the internet and with all the different forms of communication, it's much easier to follow the minor leagues and see what's going on and try to figure out, who the next wave of your players are going to be. And that, that's kind of the mode we're in. In our case, our top prospects are mostly in low A in the South Atlantic League. Well, that's 4 steps from the big leagues, but at least there's kind of a core down there, but there's also spots, in other levels that we're following it. And I'm sure Oriole fans are, obviously that's the harder core fans. The casual fans aren't going to follow that quite as much until they get more on the radar at the big league level or at least AAA. But it is what it is.
You made an interesting point about, that your guys were in the Sally. Well, around here, we just go and see those games, right? And and literally, right before I had you on, I was on the Bay Sox site seeing that Friday night is Seinfeld night, and Saturday night is, and this is in my honor, I think, Steve, Hispanic Appreciation Night. So,
beautiful.
So my Hispanic background and my heritage night, that'll be Saturday night at Bowie. So I know what the promotions are at Bowie, which is, maybe speaks to my baseball nerd, my guest to some degree. Steve Stewart here, longtime Royals broadcaster. Before that, spent some time in Cincinnati as well as with the Orioles and WBAL here many, many moons ago. One last thing on sort of the global side of baseball, because you watch it every night, for better or worse. Do you like the way the game is played at this point? And I would bring the Royals into this, where the bullpen became such a factor, right, in those series, especially against the Orioles a couple years ago, where it becomes a 6-inning game and the shutdown. That's a new way of playing it. The A's are going about things anti-Moneyball this year. That's a different way to do it. There's a lot of ways to do it, but loading up in the bullpen, the Royals sort of became that, and everyone sort of looked to that. And I don't know if that's a fad, a trend, or a way to win a World Series, but certainly once the playoff starts in October again, that's all we're going to be talking about, who you have in your bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, the Royals were, most sports are sort of a copycat business, and in our case, there were three things about those championship teams that really stood out. The bullpen was number one, of course. The other thing was athleticism/defense, where they really emphasize that in our system. We have the biggest ballpark in the American League, and I guess the second biggest in baseball in terms of acreage. And so being able to cover a lot of ground in the outfield and so forth is so big. And then, and it's hard to believe it was only 3 years ago, but the team slogan, which I was kind of surprised didn't wind up on the ring, but every player was saying it, was "Keep the line moving," which you hear a lot of teams say. In other words, the next at bat, okay, hey, do something positive, bring the next guy up, let's keep the line moving. But a lot of that was don't strike out. Make contact. Walk maybe, but don't strike out. Make contact. Keep the line moving. Get the next guy up to the plate. And we're in a period right now of the three true outcomes of the strikeouts, the walks, and the home runs. And that part of the game, I think, is less entertaining. And I'm hoping that it'll evolve back to more of a contact game, more hit and run, more, there's such an incentive to hit home runs that strikeouts aren't an embarrassment like they were 20, 30 years ago. To strike out 100 times was an embarrassment. To strike out 200 times was unheard of. Now, unfortunately, it's gotten more common because I guess contractually players aren't getting penalized for striking out a lot. But still a great game, but, it's always going through modifications and evolution, and so it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here. But yeah, bullpens are huge, and we were just in Tampa Bay, and man, pitching, baby. I mean, they're several games over 500. They've completely turned the roster over, but the thing that's really worked for them is pitching, whether it's an opener, a closer, or whatever. They've got a good bullpen and just enough. They don't have enough starters, so they kind of piecemeal it together, and it does show the way that pitching is number one, that's for sure.
Never enough arms, right, Steve? And I guess for the Red Sox, this runaway train that they've been this year, it's almost frightening because I remember the Seattle runaway train, and I remember some of the runaway trains of the Orioles, right, that didn't run away. And, winning all these games, it's all well and good, but you better win game one.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about that, especially if you're at home, so especially in a best-of-5 type of deal. So it can be treacherous, it can all, it can go by in a blink. I mean, in the postseason, it goes fast. So that's the great equalizer. It's so funny, 162 versus, one game or a best-of-5 or best-of-7. It's fascinating once you get to that postseason.
Did you see this Oakland thing coming? That's I mean, maybe people could say, well, the Braves and the Phillies, in the offseason with young teams, you never know about. Even Milwaukee with what they've done there. But this Oakland story, this is as good a story as maybe since the last time Oakland did it, because Oakland shouldn't be doing it, right?
Yeah, it's impressive, and they're either they're either building or tearing down. There's no middle ground with them. And they, in 14, they went for it. I mean, they made some big trades. They traded Cespedes. They brought in John Lester, and of course we beat him in that insane wild card game.
They did every single thing you're supposed to do. Like literally, if you go back and read that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And they were seen as a team that was going to be. I think my impression was they were going to be a good team, probably have a winning record. Obviously, being in Houston's division and being in the American League with knowing that 2 or 3 teams in the East were you're going to have 100-type win seasons. You didn't necessarily see them getting to where they are, but yeah, they've done a lot of things right this year. They're fun to watch every night if you can stay up that late.
Well, they come in here in the middle of September. I mean, the game's going to mean something for them. I think this is going to be a good race to the end, and then you have to go to Yankee Stadium and win a game. So it will make for drama instantly once the playoffs start, where the Yankees are going to be the first team on the line to get punched out, right?
It could be. Again, it'll be fun. I'll tell you the 2 wild card nights are really fun because it's like back-to-back game 7s, and I like the fact that it's one game because it puts more of an emphasis on winning the division. You want to stay out of that wild card game. You don't want to win your division if you can't, so you don't have to be in the wild card game. But if you're in it, it's fun for everybody because it's like a game 7, and B, if the coin flip, but if you do win that wild card game, it's shown like it did with us in 14. It can really launch you. It can give you real momentum and get that kind of magic going through the postseason. So it's a fun couple of nights.
Well, look, whatever we do, we need to lose to you guys this weekend. We need to get the number 1 pick in the draft. You got the championship. All we want to do is get the number 1 pick in the draft. So, pray for us. We're trying to, get to 40 before we get to 100. And I just hope that 3 to 5 years from now, I'm not like on the phone with you saying, "What's a pennant race, Steve?" I don't remember what that is. So,
hey, believe me, I agree. I sure hope so too. I hope it's quick for both these guys.
Well, at least you got barbecue, and at least we got crab cakes around here, so we got that going.
You better believe it.
Steve Stewart from Kansas City, the Royals broadcaster, longtime Royals broadcaster. Always a pleasure to visit with you, my friend.
All right, Nestor, we'll talk to you soon.
You got it. He's out in Kansas City, Missouri. And if you get a chance to get out there, the Ravens are playing out there in December. I'm going to be abstaining from that one, a rare road trip missed for me. But I got some fish to fry and some personal development I'm working on in December around here as well. You can develop yourself in the buyatoyota.com audio vault by listening to any of our chats that you hear on WNST. It's there for you anytime, anywhere. No static at all, just like Steely Dan and FM. Steely Dan is playing the Modell Lyric, my birthday week. It's October 11th, not December. What am I saying? October 11th. More shows on the way. Straight No Chaser playing at Modell Lyric, as well as Kansas. And you can hear my interview with Kansas violinist David Ragsdale out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. And you can learn all about the Modell Lyric and John Cusack and all the cool stuff that's going on down there at modell-lyric.com. You can find me out anytime, anywhere in the WNST morning newspaper. All of our headlines, all the news shipped to you at 7 a.m. every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Also brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel, where they are back to racing next week at Laurel. And, of course, the DeFrancis Dash around the corner and the Maryland Million on October the 20th. Learn more on the front of WNST.net. Click on the Laurel entries. Also, in our morning newspaper each and every morning. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis is here on Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.